I was mocked, belittled, and ignored by my own family for choosing my passion over their practical expectations. They laughed at me, called me a joke, and treated my dreams like nothing. I worked in silence, struggling, failing, and learning until one day my success couldn't be denied. The same people who mocked me, my cousins, my relatives, even those who tried to undermine me, had to watch as I rose above them. Seeing their shock, their jealousy, and realizing that I had finally earned respect was the sweetest justice I could ever imagine. I never thought a simple family gathering could turn into the kind of nightmare that stays with you for years. But last Thanksgiving, something happened that completely changed how I see my relatives and how I see myself. I still remember the moment clearly, sitting at the polished oak dining table, turkey steaming in the center, and realizing that my own family didn't respect me at all. It started with a joke, or so they thought, but it shook me to my core. You know, you make more money if you actually did something useful, my cousin said, smirking as if it were funny. And just like that, the whole room laughed. Everyone except me. I froze. I couldn't believe my ears. My profession, the one I had worked so hard to succeed in, was suddenly a punchline to them. I wanted to scream, to cry, to leave, but I sat there pretending it didn't hurt. That was the moment I realized I couldn't let them disrespect me like that. I grew up in a small town where family gatherings were everything. Holidays, birthdays, even casual Sundays, we always came together, ate too much, talked too loudly. My parents always told me to pick a practical career, but I had a passion for something unconventional. I loved tech, online markets, digital entrepreneurship. I started small, running websites and experimenting with online trading. My family? They laughed. My aunts would roll their eyes, my uncles would snicker, and my cousins would whisper, "He'll never make anything out of that." But I kept at it. Night after night, I learned, I tested, I failed, and I got back up. I wasn't doing it to prove them wrong. Okay, maybe a little. The tension during that Thanksgiving was unbearable. My cousin, let's call him Greg, had always been competitive. Greg worked as a manager at a local construction company and liked to brag about his six-figure salary. He always made it sound like everyone else's achievements were irrelevant. My aunt, his mom, nodded and said, "See, you could never make a living doing what you do." I felt my face burn. I wanted to remind them all that life isn't just about a steady paycheck. I wanted to show them that ambition and intelligence could earn respect and success, even if it wasn't in a traditional career. After dinner, I didn't say anything. I walked out to the backyard, stared at the cold November sky, and made a silent promise. I'll show them, I muttered to myself. That night, I logged into my trading accounts, checked my online business stats, and smiled for the first time in months. All those late nights, all the stress, all the risk, it was finally paying off. And I knew, deep down, that one day I would have the last laugh. The following months were a whirlwind. I poured everything into my projects. Websites, trading, P2P lending, digital marketing. I tried everything. I faced failures I didn't even want to think about. Moments where I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. But slowly my income grew. Slowly, my side projects turned into real, tangible money. By the next year, I had earned more than Greg's six-figure salary, more than my uncle's small business. And the satisfaction wasn't just financial, it was personal. I was finally in a position where I could show them they were wrong. But how do you tell your family that you're now the one in the position of power, without sounding arrogant or mean? That was the dilemma. I didn't want to gloat, at least not too much. Yet, every time we gathered after that, the air was tense. They could feel that something had shifted. My confidence had grown, and my success, though quiet, spoke volumes. One holiday, my aunt commented, "Wow, you're doing really well for yourself." And I smiled, pretending it was casual. But inside, I was thinking, finally, you see me now. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Because once my family realized I had beaten their expectations, the dynamics changed. They weren't just surprised. They were defensive, jealous, even vindictive. They started making comments, try to downplay my achievements. "Well, it's not like you've been at it that long," Greg sneered one evening. But this time, I wasn't the kid sitting quietly at the table. I had a strategy, patience, and evidence. I wasn't going to argue with words. I was going to show them the results. That was the start of a long, strange journey. A journey that involved quiet revenge, unexpected twists, and moments where I almost gave up. But every insult, every joke at my expense, only fueled me. I won't lie, it was exhausting. It felt like living in two worlds, one where I pretended to be normal with my family, and one where I worked in silence, building my empire, waiting for the right time. And then it happened. The moment where I finally got to see the shock on their faces when the truth came out. That's the story I'm going to tell you in the next part. The moment when the tables turned completely, and the family that mocked me had no choice but to face reality. They had always underestimated me, laughed at my choices, and treated me like I was insignificant. But I was done being invisible. I was done being mocked. The next chapter? That's when I made them realize just how wrong they had been. And no, did they notice? After months of quiet work, the day finally came when my family started noticing a difference. It began innocently enough. My dad casually asked me over the phone, "So, how's that project of yours going?" I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the curiosity that hadn't been there before. I kept my tone light. "It's going well, Dad. Better than I expected, actually." He didn't push further, but I could sense the tension, the subtle shift in his perception. A few weeks later, we had another family gathering. This time, it was my cousin Greg's birthday. I wasn't particularly close to him, but I knew he would be there, along with the rest of the family. I walked into the party, casually dressed, carrying a small gift, trying to act like everything was normal. But as soon as Greg saw me, I noticed his smirk falter. Something in his eyes changed. It was almost fear, mixed with disbelief. "Hey, so, how's work?" he asked, voice a little too casual. I smiled, sipping my drink. "Actually, it's been great. I just closed a deal this week that doubled my monthly income. Feels good to see hard work paying off." The room went silent for a moment. My Aunt Greg's mom tried to laugh it off. "Oh, that's nice, dear." But it wasn't just nice. It was shocking to them. They had spent years mocking me, belittling my profession, laughing at my choices. And now I was standing there, calm, confident, and financially successful. Greg tried to recover. "Well, money isn't everything, right?" I leaned against the counter, casually replying, "True, but it does help when people start taking you seriously." That's when the whispers started. I could hear them talking behind my back, trying to figure out how I had done it. I smiled inside. They had no idea. No idea about the long nights, the failures, the late hours of research, the endless trial and error. They only saw the result. And the best part? I didn't have to brag. My success spoke for itself. Over the next few months, I continued to grow my income. Every family gathering became a test. Would they notice? Would they try to dismiss me? And every time, I saw the little cracks forming in their facade. My uncle, who had always been condescending, started asking me for financial advice quietly when he thought no one was watching. My aunt, who always rolled her eyes at me, now subtly complimented my projects when she thought it would look casual. The real turning point came when my parents suggested we invest in a family vacation home. Normally, this would have been an exciting conversation, but I knew they expected me to hesitate. I didn't. I looked at them, my voice calm but firm. "I can cover my share, plus half of the renovations, no problem. In fact, I can manage the investment side to make sure it's profitable for all of us." Silence. Dead silence. Greg nearly choked on his drink. He had spent years thinking he had the upper hand. Now, the younger cousin he mocked was not only financially independent, but offering to take control of a major family investment. Over the next weeks, the subtle tension grew into outright jealousy. Greg tried to undermine me, making snide comments about lucky deals or short-term success. I just smiled. I knew he didn't understand the work behind it. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. My mom called me, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, Greg's company, they're in trouble. He might lose his job. I don't know what to do." I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Pity, satisfaction, and a deep, quiet sense of justice. The cousin who had mocked me for years, who had tried to make me feel small, was now vulnerable. And the irony wasn't lost on me. I had turned the tables, not through confrontation, but by quietly building my life while he underestimated me. When the next family gathering came, Greg walked in, shoulders slumped, looking defeated. I kept my composure, greeted him politely, and offered to help him navigate his financial troubles. The room was filled with awkward glances. People were noticing. I wasn't the kid with a weird hobby anymore. I was a force they hadn't expected, a person who had earned respect the hard way. One evening, my dad pulled me aside. "I didn't realize you've really done something incredible here. I'm proud of you." His words hit me differently than any family joke or insult ever had. It wasn't just about money. It was about acknowledgement, about finally being seen. But the story didn't end there. Because as my family's perception shifted, so did their behavior. Suddenly, there were expectations, assumptions, and pressure. I realized that success comes with attention, and attention sometimes brings envy and manipulation. My cousin Greg tried to cozy up, asking for advice, offering empty compliments. My aunt subtly criticized my decisions, trying to regain the upper hand. But I stayed calm. I had learned that real power isn't in shouting or confrontation. It's in steady, undeniable results. And then came the big test, a family meeting about a major inheritance, something that had always been a source of tension in our family. Normally, Greg and others would try to assert dominance, belittle me, or push me aside. But this time, the room felt different. People were listening. I presented my ideas logically, calmly, showing them projections, calculations, and possibilities. The family was stunned. They had no choice but to take me seriously. And when my cousin tried to argue, I simply smiled, showing proof of my achievements. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything. The jokes, the mockery, the endless disbelief, they had all fueled me. I hadn't needed to prove myself to strangers or anyone else. I only needed to prove it to the people who had made me feel small. And I did, quietly, steadily, without malice, but with undeniable results. The real lesson? Respect is earned, not given. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't in shouting or revenge. It's in silently becoming unstoppable while those who doubted you watch in disbelief. But the story doesn't end here. The next chapter is where the tension explodes, where family dynamics reach a breaking point, and where the real drama of money, pride, and betrayal comes to a head. That's when I learned that success is not just about proving others wrong. It's about seeing who stands by you when the stakes are highest. The tension in the family had reached a point I never expected. After months of quiet success, I realized that my achievements had changed everything. My relatives no longer saw me as the kid with a weird hobby. They saw me as a threat. And that was the moment I understood. Some people aren't jealous of success. They're terrified of it. It started subtly. At a Sunday family dinner, Greg tried his usual condescending tone. "So, did your little projects make you rich yet?" He smirked, expecting laughter. But this time, the room didn't laugh. I looked at him, calm and controlled, and said, "Actually, yes. And I can show you the numbers if you want." The silence was deafening. My parents exchanged glances, and even my aunts and uncles were stunned. Greg's face turned red, but he didn't back down. "Well, money isn't everything," he muttered. I shook my head slightly, smiling. Money isn't everything, but it does show who's serious about their future and who isn't. The comment hung in the air like smoke. No one knew what to say. I could feel the shift. My words, my success, my quiet confidence were changing the power dynamics in the family. For years, they had mocked me, dismissed me, and tried to keep me in a small box. Now they were realizing that box no longer existed. The real drama began when my uncle suggested a big family investment, a plot of land my grandparents had left behind. Greg immediately jumped in, trying to dominate the conversation. "We should sell it. It's just land, and it's not like anyone here can manage it properly." He glanced at me with that smirk, expecting me to shrink. But I didn't. I calmly laid out a plan. How we could develop the land, manage the investment, and ensure a good return for everyone. I even offered to handle all the details myself. The room went quiet. My parents looked at me with surprise. Greg looked furious. "Wait, You can actually do that?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said simply. "I've been running projects like this for months. This isn't new to me." From that moment, the subtle war within the family escalated. Greg began undermining me in small, frustrating ways. He would question my suggestions, talk over me during meetings, and even whisper doubts to my parents and relatives. I could feel the tension grow, thick like fog. But instead of reacting angrily, I stayed calm. I had learned that reacting would only give him power. Silence and results were stronger than any argument. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, Greg tried to sabotage a business deal I had been negotiating online. He bragged about it to our relatives, hoping they would see me as incompetent. But he underestimated the fact that I had anticipated challenges like this. I confronted him calmly. "I know what you tried to do, but you can't change facts. The deal is already finalized," and it went smoothly. His jaw dropped. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The room was filled with tension. For the first time, my family saw Greg not as a winner, but as someone desperate, insecure, and petty. The next family gathering was electric. I arrived expecting awkwardness, but I didn't anticipate the storm that was about to unfold. Greg had rallied some relatives, subtly planting doubts about my success. "He's lucky. Anyone could do it if they stumbled on the right deals," he whispered. I laughed softly. "Luck is only part of the story," I said, addressing the room. "Consistency, hard work, and learning from failure matter more. Maybe that's why some of us are still trying to figure out life, while others are building it." The room went silent again. My parents looked both proud and slightly guilty. Greg's face was red, and I could see the mix of anger and humiliation in his eyes. But what really happened next was unexpected. My younger cousin, someone who had always looked up to Greg, spoke up. "You know, he's right. I've seen how hard he works. Maybe we should start listening instead of judging." The room shifted. The tides were turning, and Greg's power was slipping. The family, once united in mocking me, was now divided. Some still whispered, trying to defend him, but others quietly acknowledged my achievements. It was a slow, subtle victory, but a victory nonetheless. Over the next few weeks, I continued to build my business and reputation within the family. I didn't gloat, but the results spoke for themselves. Greg's attempts to undermine me failed repeatedly. Every insult, every joke, every whisper about luck or inexperience only highlighted my competence. Then came the ultimate test, the family inheritance discussion. For years, this had been a source of tension. Everyone expected Greg to dominate, to make decisions, to push me aside. But when the meeting began, I stayed calm, organized, and professional. I presented my ideas, plans, and calculations clearly. I showed them how my projects had grown, how I could manage investments responsibly, and how our family could benefit. Greg tried to interrupt, tried to challenge my suggestions, but each time I had evidence, proof, and logic ready. The room watched as he faltered, his confidence slipping away. For the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not mockery, but fear. By the end of the discussion, my parents were visibly impressed. Even my aunts nodded in approval. Greg left quietly, defeated. I didn't feel gloating satisfaction, just a deep sense of justice. For years, I had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed. Now, the truth was undeniable. My hard work, patience, and persistence had earned me respect, influence, and authority in the family. That night, as I reflected on everything, I realized the real lesson wasn't just about proving Greg wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could overcome negativity, mockery, and doubt. It was about showing that success isn't about confrontation. It's about quiet resilience, consistency, and patience. But the story isn't over yet. Because while I had gained respect and recognition, Greg's jealousy was far from gone. And sometimes, jealousy can push people to do things you would never expect. The next chapter? That's where the real climax happens. The moment when family loyalty, greed, and pride collide, and the final test of patience, courage, and justice begins. Things escalated faster than I could have imagined. After the inheritance meeting, The tension in the family became almost unbearable. Greg's jealousy had turned into something more dangerous. He started plotting, subtly manipulating situations, trying to regain his dominance. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just angry. He was desperate. Every gathering felt like walking through a minefield. I had to be careful, strategic, and patient. It all came to a head one evening when my parents invited the entire family over for a dinner to celebrate a small milestone in my business. I had doubled my earnings in 6 months, but I didn't want to boast. I just wanted to share the moment with the family that had once laughed at me. What I didn't anticipate was the trap Greg had set. Halfway through the dinner, Greg leaned over to my aunt and uncle, whispering so I could hear, "Let's see how long he can keep up this act. He's about to embarrass himself." I froze, sensing the tension in the air. Something was about to happen, and I had to stay composed. The first sign was subtle. One of my older cousins, usually quiet and friendly, asked about the investment I was managing for the family. Greg interrupted with a smirk. He probably just got lucky. Numbers can be made to look good. Everyone turned to me. I felt my pulse quicken, but I stayed calm. Actually, the numbers are audited and verifiable. I've included all documentation. You're welcome to review them. Greg's smirk faltered. The room sensed a shift. People started whispering. Some looked impressed, some confused, but no one dared side openly with him. I could feel the momentum turning. Then came the unexpected twist. Greg had secretly contacted a potential investor for one of my projects, trying to sabotage the deal by spreading misinformation. When the call came in that evening, I answered calmly. "I'm aware of the confusion. Let me clarify everything." I calmly walked the investor through the project, providing evidence, data, and a clear plan. By the end of the call, the investor was reassured and confirmed the deal. My family, who had overheard part of the conversation, was stunned. Greg's jaw dropped. "How'd he fix that?" I told them. He started, but no one listened. The room was silent, the tension thick. It was the first real moment where my family saw the stark contrast between reckless arrogance and calm competence. But the drama didn't stop there. Later that night, during dessert, my uncle brought up a sensitive topic, the family business, which had been in financial trouble for years. Greg tried to assert control, proposing risky decisions without any real plan. I could see the panic in my parents' faces as Greg rambled. Calmly, I spoke up. "I've analyzed the numbers. Here's a step-by-step strategy to stabilize the business, reduce debt, and increase revenue sustainably. I've already run simulations showing potential outcomes." The room fell silent. My uncle looked at me, incredulous, while Greg sputtered, clearly trying to regain authority. But that's... How did you?" he stammered. I smiled softly. "Experience, research, and consistency. It's not luck. It's preparation." And then it happened, the moment that marked the true climax. Greg, unable to contain his frustration, lashed out. "You think you're better than me. You think you can run everything." His voice shook with anger. You're just a kid with a laptop, pretending you know the world." I held my ground, calm but firm. "I'm not pretending, Greg. I'm showing results. You can choose to participate, help, and learn, or you can step aside. The choice is yours." The room went quiet. Even my usually quiet cousins were watching, mouths slightly open. Greg's arrogance was meeting reality head-on, and for the first time, he had no defense. He tried one last time to undermine me, pointing fingers and making snide remarks about my age and lack of experience. But I didn't flinch. I had evidence, results, and patience on my side. Finally, my father intervened, voice stern but proud. "Enough, Greg. It's time to acknowledge hard work and results. You've mocked, doubted, and belittled for too long. This isn't about age or luck. It's about competence. And right now, he's proven himself." Greg's face turned red, a mix of humiliation and disbelief. The room felt tense, almost like holding a breath, waiting for an explosion. But no one exploded. The power had shifted, and everyone knew it. My family saw clearly who had the knowledge, discipline, and capability to lead and succeed. In the days following that dinner, things changed irreversibly. Greg avoided direct confrontation, though his bitterness lingered. My parents and other relatives began seeking my advice more openly. They acknowledged my achievements quietly, sometimes apologetically. And for the first time, I felt a real sense of validation, not just for my work, but for my patience, resilience, and intelligence. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about money or power. It was about respect, pride, and the long shadow of doubt cast by people you love. The real climax wasn't just in confronting Greg. It was in the transformation of the family dynamic. What once was ridicule and dismissal became acknowledgement and even admiration. Yet, there was one final twist. Greg, in his frustration, attempted one last maneuver. He tried to claim credit for a small project I had started months before, spreading rumors to distant relatives. I let him. I didn't react. I knew that truth always catches up. Within weeks, he had been exposed. The relatives he had deceived confronted him, and he had no choice but to admit the truth. Karma had arrived quietly, without me needing to lift a finger. That's when I realized the ultimate lesson. You don't have to fight for respect with anger or revenge. Hard work, integrity, and persistence will always reveal the truth. And when people try to undermine you, the best response is quiet competence and letting reality do the talking. The next chapter, the resolution, is where the final shifts happen, relationships stabilize, and the family truly acknowledges the journey. But the drama, tension, and lessons from this peak moment will stay with me forever. After the stormy dinner and the subtle but undeniable victory over Greg, life slowly began to change within the family. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but the shift was real. People who had doubted me for years were now approaching me differently, some with curiosity, others with respect, and a few, begrudgingly, with admiration. For the first time, I felt the weight of years of mockery lift, replaced by acknowledgement and quiet pride. The first sign of real change came from my parents. They started asking for my advice on practical matters, investments, projects, even planning family events. One evening, my dad pulled me aside after a small gathering. I didn't understand before. "You've really built something incredible. I'm proud of you, son." His words hit me in a way no joke or insult from Greg ever could. I nodded, holding back emotion. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." For years, I had felt invisible, dismissed, and underestimated. Hearing him say that, finally, it felt like coming home. Greg, meanwhile, was still present at family events, but he had lost his dominance. His attempts to undermine me had been exposed one by one. His whispered criticisms, the attempts to manipulate others, even the small lies he spread about my achievements, all of it came back to him. The distant relatives who had been unsure began to see the truth, and Greg had no defense. Watching him struggle quietly, defeated but not humiliated publicly, gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. Not revenge, just justice. Life had a way of balancing itself, and he had learned it the hard way. The turning point came during the next family gathering, a holiday celebration. Everyone was present: parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. I had prepared a short speech, not to boast, but to acknowledge the journey we had all been on together. Standing there, I spoke simply, calmly, yet with emotion. For years, I've been underestimated and doubted. I've made mistakes, failed, and learned. But through it all, I kept going. And today, I want to say thank you, not just for the support, but for the lessons, even the hard ones. Because without them, I wouldn't be here. There were murmurs of agreement, nods, even a few teary eyes. My parents hugged me afterward. My aunt, who had once rolled her eyes at me, quietly said, "I see now. You've done amazing things." And in that moment, I realized the real victory wasn't money or power. It was recognition, respect, and restoring balance in relationships that had been strained for years. Greg approached me later that evening. His expression was complicated, resentment mixed with a grudging acknowledgement. "I didn't see this coming. You've really done it," he said quietly. I nodded, keeping my tone neutral but firm. "It wasn't about beating you, Greg. It was about proving to myself that hard work and patience matter. Maybe now you understand." He looked away, silent, but something had shifted. Even he had to admit, internally, that I had earned my place. In the weeks that followed, our family began functioning differently. Meetings became collaborative rather than competitive. My parents sought my input regularly. Greg began keeping a quieter, more cautious approach, and other relatives started approaching me for advice. The subtle tension that had dominated years of family gatherings was gone. In its place was a mixture of respect, acknowledgement, and a newfound sense of harmony. I also realized something crucial about success and recognition. You can't force respect, and you can't buy it. You earn it through consistency, patience, and proving yourself through results rather than words. Family dynamics are complicated, filled with pride, jealousy, and old habits. But when you maintain integrity, focus on growth, and let achievements speak for themselves, people eventually see the truth. Looking back, the journey wasn't just about showing Greg or the family that I could succeed. It was about learning resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. Every insult, every whispered doubt, every mocking comment became fuel for my determination. And in the end, it wasn't me standing on top to humiliate someone else. It was me standing confidently, showing that truth, competence, and integrity are more powerful than arrogance or deceit. The final lesson hit me clearly one quiet evening. I sat alone, reviewing my projects and the family interactions over the past year. I smiled, thinking about how far I had come. It wasn't just about financial success. It was about self-respect, dignity, and fairness. I had turned years of ridicule into motivation, and the family, even Greg, had seen the results. Karma had quietly done its work, but I had also contributed through my discipline and perseverance. And so, the story ends not with gloating or revenge, but with a sense of justice, accomplishment, and moral clarity. Greg learned that arrogance and mockery can't withstand consistent effort and genuine results. The family learned to see me as I truly am. Not just the kid with a laptop, not just the weird entrepreneur, but a capable, determined, and respected adult. And I learned that real power lies in quiet confidence, patience, and letting your actions speak louder than words. As I reflect now, I understand that life will always test relationships, pride, and ambition. There will be skeptics, doubters, and people who underestimate you. But if you remain steadfast, focused, and patient, the truth eventually emerges. And when it does, respect, recognition, and justice follow naturally. For me, that was the sweetest victory of all.